podcast.
Oh, welcome to the Awakening Podcast. You'll find other episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. Find everything about Arnold, braingym.fitness, and on me. Scan the QR code or go to roycollin.com. What we discussing today, Arnold?
Finally, we're going to discuss about youth. Well, the reason
It's been a while. It's been a while.
yeah, well, we are youthful in our mind, Roy. So
And hearts.
yeah, so the body might lack a little bit, but I think that's not the most relevant. So, and because we talked last week about Alzheimer's and dementia, which, well, not only but mostly a disease of elderly people, we decided to say, let's go what's happening with youth in the world. And it's got my special attention. So I decided to, well, from which I learned a lot, is like, okay, when we talk about youth, who are we talking about? And how many? And I came to some interesting conclusions. So when I did a search on what's the definition of youth. Is it 0 to 10, 0 to 20? What is it? And it came up that the UN, United Nations, use an official definition that youth are people between 15 and 24. That's quite an interesting statistic already, right? I would not have imagined, I would have said, if it's that would be 0 to 24. No, it's 15 to 20.
I would have thought this. I was thinking youth. If you asked me what youth, I would have said up to teenage years or something like that.
Yeah, but it's 15 to 24, and it's apparently an official definition which is used quite widely. So you have to be aware then that if people use that, that is what they're thinking about. And this age class of 15 to 24, Roy, how much is that of the world population? So, in other words, how many
I know what you mean.
in that class?
25%.
Oh, you're way too high. That is 16. So 16% of the world population is between 15 and 24. So then I asked it like, yeah, but I want to know, let's say, from 0 to 24, because I think that's more useful. Why use 15? I didn't go into that discussion, but it like, okay, tell me how much of the world population is between 0 and 24. Roy, give it a go again.
I'd say similar what I had said earlier, because that's what was in my head. I didn't go from the 15 just because. So I'd say it's probably more actually, because some of the like Africa and stuff like that, their lifespan wouldn't be as high as Europe and things like that. So I'd say it might be 30%.
Well, now you're too low. It is 40, 40, which is huge, which is almost half of the world population is younger than 24. I think that's the way to put it. That's incredible, right? And it said that it's roughly 25% under the age of 15 and 15 to 16% in the what we just said, 16% in the 15 to 24. So we're talking about a lot of people when we talk about youth. And when we talk about what's happening there and what's the impact on the world, because these are all people who are, well, except when you're 5-year-old or whatever, it's like people are growing up, going to education, and then enter, hopefully for them, the labor force and start to play a role in society. But this is half of our current population. That's incredible. And are they a happy bunch or not, Roy?
Well, from research that I've done for a long time and even conversations with you and just from different people, I see unfortunately, a lot of young people are seeing therapists. I remember talking to one guy on Lunch Club, and his child was in Sweden, and he said it was only his child was the only person not seeing a therapist, which would mean depression, anxiety, stress is probably at this 80% mark.
Yeah, I can recall those discussions as well. Is that, well, when I was in that age, I knew nobody who had a therapist.
Me either.
And now it's the opposite. Like, if you don't have a therapist, well, what's wrong with you? So, totally incredible. Yeah. And they're very dissatisfied up to the point where a word was used. It says here, analysts describe it, and I find it a very interesting thing, as a generational revolt. Well, if you talk about 40% of the population, it's a generation and even more. But a generational revolt. Why? Because they're protesting all over the world. I will come in a minute there. And they demand transparency, better governance, less corruption. That is a category, if you will like, where they are really, really fed up. I can relate that to it because when I take a Bolt that's kind of a European Uber, then they're always students or young people driving. And when they notice that I'm a foreigner, within 5 minutes, they start telling me about the corruption of their government. Within 5 minutes. I don't know the folks, whatever. And they start complaining about it. So it's a big issue among young people. Another one is climate action. And I'm not talking about the climate hoax. I'm talking about there are a lot of countries where the problems with water for drinking, washing, but also water levels in the waterways. I was watching a travel video where someone was going over the length of the Amazon River, and in many places it was too low for the boats to get ashore. So it's everywhere. There's like, because of the drought and everything, there's a lack of water. So,
and just on that, because I've done, I'm heavily involved with real estate for years, and in Spain, and one of the guys I know that was working with a lot of agents, there's a lot of communities in Spain. There's no water. So at one stage, the kind of city municipality was bringing water, and they stopped doing it. They're just deserted village. So there's no water there. And like, nobody hears about that because they don't want to say anything, but that's happening in Europe as well.
yeah, and I think I mentioned it in another one of our shows that I think in Kabul, whatever, they expect just in a few years there will be not any water anymore. There will be, like in Spain, totally dependent on trucks bringing water, but there are millions of people living there. So this is really, really a serious issue. And the third thing, well, of course, everything is related. They call it better living standards. It's like education, healthcare. And I'm not even talking about work, paid work, jobs. A lot of these young people, they're having huge problems with that. Because they're, well, if it depends on the country, but if your government doesn't say, well, education or higher education is free, but if you get to pay, it becomes a problem, especially for young people. And if your parents don't have money, what are you going to do? So they're not getting the education. Well, the education system is lousy, but at least you need to have the basics.
But I see what's happening with the States, where you can't, even if you go into bankruptcy, you can't write that off. There was always kind of free education in most of Europe, and now that's slowly creeping up, and the figures are creeping up. And what it does is it limits you straight away. So if you get into bad circumstances or your parents are on the breadline, you then don't have the opportunity to go into university, which isn't fair.
Yeah, and it creates a class of poverty by birth kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes.
Hmm? Healthcare, yeah, in the insurance and everything else is also like if you're in rural areas, and especially in a large country, there is not even healthcare. Or there might be on a couple of million folks, there's one nurse. Yeah, so that is why these young people are protesting, because all the, I would say, the foundations of living your life, like getting work, getting health, getting a job, it's no longer there. And the prospect is that there will be no water. It will be fucking hot. Yeah, and yeah, it's like, and there's no energy. Well, you cannot afford to have air conditioning and everything else. So, what's their life? And on the other end, what they're seeing, and I've been following 6, 7 countries all over the world for the last few months and asking what's happening politically, socially, economically, and tell me what not only from that perspective, but also from the perspective, what does it mean for the population, especially the younger one? And really, from one end, in Nepal on the world to Paraguay, Uruguay on the other one, and other countries in between, I'm seeing exactly the same thing, that the youth, again, 40% of the population, they're so fed up, the huge demonstrations, and I maybe to say it's a good moment to list where there's been very, very impactful demonstration of, yeah, they call it Gen Z, or, well, let's not go into that discussion, but it like all of these countries where there have been impactful, I will mention in a moment what is impactful demonstrations. It's in Morocco, Peru, Madagascar, Bangladesh, Kenya, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Nepal, Philippines, Serbia. So what you already can see proves what I said. It's all over the world. It's not only, and it used to be maybe only one part of the world. You could say, oh, nothing in Europe. No, in Serbia, Europe. Yeah. So, and I know over here, you're very dissatisfied. It's everywhere in the world. Users are having these problems, and they're fed up, and they see that their governments are not taking action. Their governments are basically filling their own pockets, and they're having a very dictatorial way of organizing and running their country, and they don't give a shit about the youth people. So the youth people are saying, hey, we're not accepting this anymore. And up to the point where, as of today, and I'm sure more things will be happening, there have been 2 countries where there has been a change in government because of those protests. One is in Nepal, so ongoing, and it was very ugly, and hundreds of people were dead because the police started shooting with real gun, with real bullets. Yeah, so people died, but the government was kicked out. And now in Nepal, there's a process, and obviously it's not an easy process, where there is a former judge of the Supreme Court, which and she's in her 70s, and people respect her. So she's now the new president, and they're building for new elections, new setup of the government, whatever. That's happening in Nepal. So it has a huge impact, and it's still ongoing. But it's not easy, because what are you going to do? How are you going to organize that? And it's a category of people who were never heard, never seen, and now they're part of the government process. So, well, that's obviously not an easy process. And what happened, I think it was last week, in Madagascar, Also, the government was thrown about to such an extent that the president he fled to France, and it was with the help of an elite army unit in combination with the young people that they are now setting up a new government. So now I want to bring it back to what we talk about. We talk about 40% of the population. So we're not talking about a handful of people. We're talking about a lot of people. And especially well, in countries like Africa, I assume it's even 50, 60, 70%. People are so fed up that even governments literally have to flee. And that's what's happening, Rod.
And the thing is, like when I was in my 20s, it was a time when people were buying houses. So you're thinking about it in your early 20s, maybe coming into 28 or whatever. Them days are gone. People now, they're in their 40s. They're living at home with their parents. They can't afford, like the rent went from about 800 for a house to a room. So now it's like 2.5 grand, 3 grand to rent. People don't have that kind of money. So like if you're renting a house, you need 30 grand. That's a salary. Like the salaries haven't gone up in correlation with the rents or with the energy bills. And it's all orchestrated. All of these governments, they're all idiots. They're all orchestrated. It's not the children that everybody's been affected, but it's like the youth are kind of saying, we've no hope. Even I know in Spain as well, it's a very high percentage of younger people. There's no jobs from. Hence why then a lot resort to criminal activities. And people hate them for that. But if they want to kind of survive, and they're going, I've no other option, because like the government and the cities aren't providing any alternatives from. And regarding, the health, the climate hoax and stuff like that, like there's also lots of organizations, where they're stopping the traffic. And you have organizations paying these people to go out and protest and glue their hands to the thing or go into different places. And they've been caught doing that. But also, it's kind of like they're getting into a cult just to have a connection with people. And they don't care that if there's someone has an animal in the car that's overheating, a baby in the car. And all of this is, I think it's a cry for help when people resort to that kind of thing. Because did you ever see anything like that in our youth? I didn't. There was nobody doing that kind of thing.
Oh, I think you use a right word. There is no hope. So when you talk about hopelessness and helplessness, because that is what it is as well, what can you do? And basically, like, as it looks now, their future is screwed. So they got nothing to lose. Because already at best they live with their parents, but a lot of them live on the street or in very, very poor conditions. So if you protest, then you run the risk that you get shot or arrested or whatever. Like, yeah, but the other option is that it will be better and the government kicks out and finally someone pays attention. So the upside of the protest for them is much bigger than the downside, because their downside is already lousy. And it's extremely lousy. And it's not their fault. It's not because they're lazy or stupid or whatever. No, it's like we, the government, the population, we basically let it get out of hand. And that's what's happening in Nepal. Is apparently the folks in the government, they even gave a lot of money and stuff to their children. So even their children, well, I've seen pictures of children being brought to school in a Rolls Royce. So it's like all the money goes to there, and if you get no money for food or to live or whatever, and you see that, then you go totally crazy. That is, I think, normal. Yeah, and that is what's happening. So, and that's a dangerous situation, because it's I would say highly inflammable, because if you get nothing to lose, that's how you will behave.
And there's actually another element to this that A lot of people probably aren't even thinking. We know that the depression, suicidal tendencies, all the different things that we talked about earlier. But unfortunately, most of the ones you need money for that to have the therapist. It's not as if they provide them, or in most countries, oh yeah, get into the system. It's like, a year later, too late. And most people can't afford to have somebody, even though they're crying out for help.
Yeah, I'm happy that you bring that up. It's like, actually, I had a friend of mine, and he was my age, and he needed a therapist, but and it was part of the healthcare insurance. This was in the Netherlands. There was a waiting list of a year. So it's just the normal procedure, everything okay. He was qualified. They said, okay, you have a problem. Yes, you need a therapist, but you gotta wait a year. What? I have a problem now. When I had my car accident, they labeled me with PTSD kind of thing, which appeared later to be totally wrong. I just got TBI, traumatic brain injury. But beside that, that's not the point. The point was I only get help because it was paid by the insurance of the guy who drove me off the road. Otherwise, I would have been the same thing. It's like, yeah, wait for a year. Well, and this is the Netherlands, yeah. And if you live in Nepal or Tunisia or Madagascar, I think basically there's nothing. Nothing.
Like even here, people have to pay Zeus, that's the social security system, and for health and things like that. And if somebody has got cancer or something like that, 6 months to live. Oh yeah, you're on the waiting list. 9 months time come into us or something like that. And it's like they're paying monthly. People have to pay about €400, and in a lot of European countries, and they can be more. And I've even heard of people getting private insurance. So before, private insurance you'd be seen straight away. You have your private room and everything's good. No, that doesn't happen anymore. The private insurance has gone through the roof, and you still have to wait, and you still have to pay when you go in there. The whole system's a fraud.
Yes, and even the young people, because they have no job and whatever, they cannot afford any insurance. So what are they supposed to do? So that is why I expect, and I've been checking this for 6, 7, 8 countries all over the world. I think we're going to see more of these protests and more of these excesses, and I'm not approving them, especially not where people get killed. But we have to be aware that it's like a dangerous animal in a cage, and you make it angry, then it will do terrible things because it's their, how do you call it? Yeah, point of no return. Then that's why I wanted to talk about youth, and you see hardly any publications, any actions, any stuff. It seems people are not taking it seriously, and that's why I started with the numbers. We're talking about almost half of the world population who are at the moment, as it stands, totally fucked. So it's there's like a minority group or just a few elderly. Now we're talking about half of the people. This will impact every aspect of our society, I think. And I think if I don't know whether it's an English saying, Dutch, we have a saying, it's like, who has the youth has the future. But if we screw up the youth, what about our future?
I'm not sure if you were planning to touch on this, but I think it's very relevant as well. The refugee camps, because I know you're talking to people in Africa, and there's a lot of youth there as well. And unfortunately, because I had heard of people that were at camps in Greece and stuff like that, where somebody was born into it and at 17 still into it. And there's no hope for them, and they don't like it. So I think I would love for you to touch on the guys that you're talking to at the moment, because it's very relevant. Because the same thing, nobody will show this on the news, no information, and it's like people then assume they're lazy, they don't want to do nothing, and that's not the situation.
No, totally not. I'm speaking to a couple of boys. One of them is 17, the other one is 21. They both live in a refugee camp in Uganda. And both of them fled the war in Congo. So one fled when he was 11, and the other one, I don't know exactly. So when they were still a young child, and their parents like, hey, this is the war, let's get out of it. And then through many, many years, he ended up in Uganda in a refugee camp, and the other one the same. That is just one of, I think, 9 of these camps in just Uganda. And I'm not talking about the other countries, I don't know, but I'm sure there are, because there are millions of people out of this war in only Congo. It's really terrible. So they move out, they end up in this refugee camp, and in a recent show, we discussed how many people are there. In this one camp, is 139,000 people. That was similar to Cork, where you from. 139,000 people in that camp, and it's been there since 1960. So there are people born in that camp. It's not only people who fled the area, but there are people born. There are people married in that camp. Because, it's just like any city. And I'm talking to these boys. I'm mentoring, training them, because they realized the same, actually, as anywhere in the world. It's the same here in Romania, in the Netherlands, in Paraguay, in India. Is that the education system is so lousy that even if you say, well, I did school, I have my diploma, I got everything, but there are no jobs. Or, well, they don't qualify for job because the education system is still the same as in the industrial age, and it hasn't changed. So they realize now, so they put in all their effort, like, let's get the diploma, but they cannot get out of the camp. They cannot get out of the settlement because even though they got the diploma, there's no work. And in total, only in Uganda, we're talking about 1.9 million people. 1.9 million people with, as it stands now, no hope, no future. The way I said, how about your parents? Do they have jobs? Do they get paid? Is it no? There's no job. There's nothing. As I said, how do you get food? They used to get food through to the UN, which is mostly funded by US aid. But Trump has chosen to block all the money exchanges in US aid. So he says, within a month or so, there will be no money for food. We're talking about 139,000 people, where they just from one moment to the other, they will have no food. And it's not that they have salaries, but because there is nothing. These people will starve to death if nothing happens. That's what we're talking about. 1.9 million people.
When we were talking about that, I mean, that's just in Uganda. What is the total amount that are in situations like that? I'd say 50 to 100 million. It's unbelievable. And out of sight, out of mind. That's the way society. But what I'm seeing is with a lot of the youth, they're standing up. They know what's injustice. And there's times, like, I think there was more of a fight in our generation, but then it's like it just stopped and people just kind of cruised through life and they just accepted all these changes coming in. But it's thankfully the younger generation, as you mentioned in the process, and unfortunately, police are standing with the government because they're loyal to the dollar and they're opening fire on them, but they're not accepting it. And I mean, we see it, like there's turmoil all over the world, and the few control the billions,
Yeah, but it's already, like I said, Nepal and Madagascar, and I'm sure others will follow very, very soon. Yeah, and at the same time, what I find interesting in Madagascar is that an elite army unit has said to the regular army, is like, no, we're going to support the youth. We're not going to support them. And I think that makes total sense because they get kids as well. Yeah, or friends or family or anyone else. So it's not like, oh, I don't know about these problems with them. I'm sure they all see in their direct environment the same problem. So that's why they're supporting the youth. And whether it's Nepal or Madagascar, I'm sure more and more will be happening. But that's the situation. It's like it's no longer like we turn a blind eye and well, it's only a few countries. It's everywhere. It's really, really everywhere. So I think it's really time that we need a good plan, we need help, we need well, I doubt whether it's gonna happen, unfortunately, but that's when after World War II for Europe, they called it the Marshall Plan. Yeah, it's like, hey, we need to rebuild Europe because it was completely destroyed and everything. Which helped a lot, by the way. But now I think we need a Marshall Plan to support the youth all over the world. And I'm trying to help. it's basically nothing. Just a few guys who were trying to build a new education system or one creating a new hospital. And I'm trying to support and help them from a distance. But it's nothing. Yeah. On the total numbers where we talk about millions and millions of these people. I would love to be able to help millions of people, but I can't. So it's like people need to stand up. Parents need to stand up because, hey, today it's a guy in Uganda in a refugee camp who you don't know, but tomorrow it's your own kid. So I think parents need to waken up. It's like, hey, we need to take some action because this is not good. And on a small scale, it's happening. Like people use it. Netherlands, rich country, everything's fine. By the way, that's totally not the case. But like you said, with housing, I hear a lot of parents are like, oh, I mean, it's not, it used to be like when you're 18, you would move out of the house. You either had a job or you went to study in another city. Well, you move out of the house. Now, I've spoken to quite a number of parents. They're like, because there is nothing, I guess they will never leave the house. It creates tension. That creates a lot of problems in itself. Yeah, like if your kids never leave the house. This is happening in a country like Netherlands. And this is, was not anymore one of the richest countries in the world. This is happening everywhere. So I think parents should waken up and should say, hey, we need to do something because in the end, our whole retirement system or everything is based upon that there is a category of people who are working, earning money, paying taxes, and they're elderly people who are retired, and the people who work provide the money for the people who are retired. But if that stops and nobody works, then you can say goodbye to your social benefits and your retirement money. So it impacts everyone.
I mean, sometimes people, they think nothing can be done, but even if we look at the schools, when you see them pushing in a certain agenda and pushing books that a child shouldn't be reading, you go in and you nip it in the bud and you stop it. Same with councils and everything. You stop it at local level. And the other thing is when something is done, there's lots, even companies involved in pushing agendas and everything. You just go in and you start giving reviews because it hits their bottom line. So when everybody is attacking them and giving opinions and showing information how bad they're doing things, their stock price goes down. They're all loyal to the dollar. So I've realized the power of actually giving reviews on Trustpilot and Google and Yelp and all that. You can do the same, but also, get a few people together, go into school and understand what your child is doing. Because unfortunately, a lot of people, they make it look like it's a babysitting service. They don't even know what's going on. Understand what's going on there and start going in there, looking around, see what they're doing. And that's how you make change.
Yeah, and this time it's not something in the far distance, or it's not like, well, I live in Europe, I don't care about people in Africa. Well, it impacts your children as well. Right now, by the way. It's even yeah, I'm in Romania. Like, I know a lot of these young people, like, there are no jobs. So even if they finish their education, because the education here is still free. By the way, there are, I think, a record number of young people who leave the school system before they're finished, which is already a sign. Why are they doing that? And the other thing is, like, even if they finish, and in the city, I think there are at least 6, 7 universities. It's a bit crazy, but like, even if they finish, there are no jobs. So it impacts everyone. And you can be sure, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's your government, whether it's the EU, they're not going to solve it. You have to take action yourself. That's why we keep on doing these calls, to awaken you and to say, you have to take action yourself, because nobody else is going to take care of you, nor your children, nor your future.
Exactly. Like what we both done is we have SKOOL Groups. There's the brain fitness on SKOOL, so skool.com/brain fitness. A lot of stuff that will help you be creative as well and make change. And I've got the podcasting one, and how that's important is, if you want to actually get your message out to people, you go into SKOOL, and it's skool.com podfodder, and you can actually create a podcast to get your message out or create a community, and it makes a big difference. So as always, Arnold, thanks very much. And you'll find him on braingym.fitness. You'll find me on rycall.com, or scan the QR code. And be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and subscribe. Really helps. Until next week, take care.